Reminds me of when I would be taking my test after I have to have read 2 or 3 chapters in the book Shane. I remember that book. Remember that book when you were in school? You had to read the book Shane, the country and western guy, and I had to read 2 or 3 chapters, and then we take a test, and we'd have to answer all these questions about what all happened in that chapter. And I'm like asking myself several times, continually and repeatedly, what happened here? Why? Because I couldn't remember. My comprehension wasn't good. I was always distracted in high school and junior high. And so I'd sit there with the exam, and I'd be asking myself continually and repeatedly, let's see, what did Shane do when he went into the town? I know the question said, answer, what did Shane do? I'm asking myself, what did he do? So I take that into this situation where Jesus asked his disciples, who did men say that I am? And I wondered, did the disciples look at him dumbfoundedly like, you got to be kidding. All the things that you've done, and you're asking us, who do people say that I am? You ought to know who people say that you are. Because you're the Son of God. You have that knowledge. You discern. You have wisdom more than we've ever seen from anybody. Why are you asking us? And so I would imagine somewhere along the line Jesus repeated his question. Who do men say that I am? Maybe he continually repeated his question 4 or 5 or 6 times. We don't know. But finally, he stops asking. He wants the disciples to answer him. Who do people say I am? The word say in the Greek is an interesting word. It means several different things. It can mean to affirm. Who do people affirm that I am? To affirm something can be done by behavior. It can be done by word. It can be done by practice. He wanted to know, who do they affirm? Are there people who affirm me? Who do people maintain that I am? Who do people teach or exhort others or advise people that I am? The disciples mixed with the community, and they heard all kinds of people talking. That's why they answered, well, some say you're Elijah. Some say you're John the Baptist. Some say that you are Jeremiah. And some say you're one of the prophets from the Old Testament. All very honorable answers, don't you think? Well, I'd like to be called, I'd like somebody to come into Canadian church and say, you've got to be John the Baptist risen from the dead. I would say no, because I don't have any locusts or wild honey. I'm not wearing what John the Baptist wore. Or I'd like somebody to say, you're like Jeremiah. Or you're like Elijah. And I'd say, yeah, I want to be like Elijah because I know I'll be blown up in a whirlwind sometime. These are all good answers, but not the one Jesus was looking for. The text doesn't bring this out, but I wonder if they purposely gave him positive answers. Because if you think about the day when Jesus was ministering, there was a lot of negativism out there about Jesus. The Pharisees called him a blasphemer. They called him a madman. They called him a false prophet. And they had many of the multitudes believing that Jesus was all of these. So I wondered why the disciples didn't bring that out either. Well, some say you're Jeremiah, but John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets. Some say you're a madman, a blasphemer, and a false prophet. The exam goes on. It wasn't necessary, really, what other people thought. What about you? What about you? Who do you say that I am? Notice the title, I am, is repeated off and on throughout the Gospels. The title of deity, the title of ownership of God Almighty over His people Israel, the declaration of the pre-existent, self-existent one. Who do you say that I am? It's as if Jesus was giving them a hint, on who He was. He says, who do you say? The word "you" is an interesting word. It implies specificity. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, we had to memorize the general laws or general code and commands, general rules, I think that's what they were called. And if you couldn't, they would come up to you individually, and at random, they would say, recite general rule number 13. And you'd have to recite it out, or you'd have to do bends and thrusts or go run 10 miles or something. At random, when they were testing us, they would just come at us, recite General Rule 4, recite General Rule 24. And I knew my time was coming. And I knew that randomly they were going to get to me, and I knew that I had to give an answer. But I was always hoping it was the guy next to me when we were standing in line at attention. I was always hoping to be one of them. But sooner or later, it came to me. And I had to give an account for what I knew. And Jesus is doing this. Remember, he's got all 12 disciples here. And he's asking them all, as a whole, who do you say? Specifically, I want to know, Frank, who you say Jesus is. Jeff, I want to know who you say Jesus is. Sandy, I want to know who you say Jesus is. I don't care what Becky thinks. I don't care what Gary thinks. Or Elaine, or John, or Kim, or Mom. Very interesting. They couldn't get around this one. Who do you say? The word I in the Greek literally means me, myself, and I. He was very emphatically pointing towards him. It's me I'm speaking about here. Who do you say that I am? And in verse 15 it goes, but what about you? Stop everything you're thinking. Is like, be still and know that I am God. Stop in your tracks and say who specifically I am. I just found it interesting. After everything they'd witnessed, after everything they had seen, what did their observations lead them to comprehend about Jesus? And so the question is given to us. This is the one question that will affect the influence that God would have upon our life. The one question, if there's ever a question that we would be confronted with, this is the life's question. There is no other question. People say the question today is, how did the universe begin? What came first, the chicken or the egg? The question isn't what came first, the chicken or the egg. The question isn't how did the universe begin? The question is, who do you say Jesus is? That's the examination. Well, the text goes on. Simon Peter answered, you, specifically Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus replies to him with a beatitude for him. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. This wasn't revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And he goes on and he says, I tell you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. This is where I want to spend the majority of our time this morning. I learned some things as I studied this out.